Hi, everybody. This is Tiffany from We Are Here. And today we have two amazing gentlemen from an initiative called Brothers with Books. We have Kevin, Isabelle-Peete, and Isiah Cudjoe. And today we are going to talk a little bit about what they do, and we're going to step back a little bit and find out a little more about them as well. So thank you for being with us today. And I wanted to ask you, let's just take it back to the beginning. When y'all were in school, like, what were some of your favorite books and what made them your favorite?
You want to go first, Kevin?
Yeah, sure, I'll take it. So, man, growing up, so me and reading have had a very interesting relationship. We weren't really strong at first, but I can definitely say now that, we're bonding, we're getting together, we're doing a lot much better. So before, a lot of the times the books that I would be interested in will remind me of like certain movies or just something on the cover that would just attract me. So, a lot of the books that I liked were, I would usually see them at scholastic book fairs, not necessarily in my school libraries. They weren't available for checkout, but they were available for purchase. So a lot of the books would be like, the Captain Underpants, they would be the Goosebumps. A lot of those models were, typically the favorites, the ones that I would always just, find myself picking up. I didn't necessarily have a lot of access to those. The ones that I did have access to that were in the school library didn't really catch my attention as much. So I was kind of just geared on, if I don't have that, then I don't have anything, So that kind of explains a lot from my relationship growing up with reading as well. So. Yeah.
And I also remember you speaking about the Scholastic Book Fair and kind of like there were barriers in terms of like, like being able to, purchase books, because they always have this grand like carnival of books. And I know from my experience, even as a teacher, sometimes it's like, okay, this is great, I have $1. You know what I mean? Like, so it was one of those things too. So what was that experience like?
Oh man, it was just like, it was really entertaining and fun to see. Like you said, it was a carnival. Like, it just felt like a huge party every time you walked in there. Like, all of the colors and everything were just so bright and, just very attention grabbing. So when I went in there and, they give you a piece of paper that says your wish list, filled it out all the time, and then when I get home, it's just like, here's reality. We can't get these things. So, my mom, she grew up, she was a teacher as well, worked in the same county. But the thing is, like, we still were able to fit under that free and reduced meals, saying that we don't have that socioeconomic status to, provide for ourselves. So, she worked for the county, did everything, dedicated her whole life there. I mean, she's still working there now, and, still under that free and reduced meal status for me and my little brother. So it was just different, I would say, because I can see all of my other friends, they would get things, and whether it's even the smallest things like a pencil, they would walk out of there with something, and it's just like, well, I'll see y'all later. I'll see you at lunch or something like that, So, it was kind of demoralizing, really. Like, you can't fit the standard and see yourself in things that you are actually wanting. So, it's definitely something that's been an experience. And I would say this is why what we do right now is really refreshing, because I see all of the books that I wanted as a kid, and not only am I able to give them out, but there's no strings attached. Like, here's a book for you for free that I wanted when I was a kid. So, it's very, very, it feels like full circle, it's very complete. So
I appreciate you sharing that, because that happens a lot, and it'll be affirming to a lot of kids to understand that they weren't alone. All right, Isaac, what's your story? What were your favorite books in school?
I think I had a very similar experience with Kevin in terms of those scholastic book fairs. I think a lot of young Black and Brown kids probably have that same experience. For me, and Kevin knows this, it was either the fourth grade, third grade, sometime in elementary school, I took one of those reading exams and I tested way higher than my reading level. And it was I and another young girl were taken to the library and told, this is your reading level. You have access to all these books, and this is what you should be reading. And I remember growing up, my dad used to always tell me that all my friends would read a book before they came to hang out with me. And I was cheating myself if I didn't read one too. And so you can imagine when my friends would knock on my door, I'm like, man, I didn't read a book today. Like maybe he's right, you know? But it is really all about access, right? I think sometimes when we see these, when we lay out books, and I think about when I was younger, some of these books existed. Some of the books that we put out aren't brand new books from 2020 or 2021. They're authors. Their authors have been around, right? I think about Toni Morrison. I think about Alice Walker. I think about Langston Hughes and Octavia Butler and all these people. We've had Black writers. We've been writing our story for a long time, or at least finding different ways to tell it. The problem is access to those books and those narratives and those stories. And I think for me growing up, it was more so access to books that reminded me of myself. And so I got interested in learning about different cultures and different people. And one book that really stuck with me is The Diary of Ben Yoshida. And it was a young Japanese boy who was interned in a Japanese internment camp. And I was in the fifth grade. I was helping my teacher clean up her classroom at the end of the school year. I happened to live right down the street from the school, so I didn't have a problem staying later and helping her. And I asked her if I could borrow the book, and I still have the book to this day. So this is the longest book borrowed in history, I'm sure. But I imagine she's happy with what I've done since I read that book. But the book was about another immigrant story, an experience of clear-cut oppression, right? And from the perspective of a 10-year-old boy. And you can imagine in fifth grade reading that, I started understanding that like, there's a host of problems around us. There's systems that are entrenched historically. And I didn't have the words to articulate it, but that was the book that was like, something's wrong. Like, how did I not learn about this before? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm in fifth grade, but this boy's 10 years old. This is like from the 10-year-old's perspective. And it's like excerpts from his diary, pictures, and things like that. And I'm like, you know, I get older and I read Anne Frank, I read all these different stories, and I'm like, man, what about Ben Yoshida? And how many other people from different groups and different backgrounds have stories that haven't been told? And how long do you have to wait to hear those stories, right? And so for me, that curiosity began very, very young.
Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, how much did you see yourself? You know, like, do you remember reading a book other than that and saying like, oh, that's me, that looks like me, that's me? You know, did you have that experience?
Yeah, there was this one book that I read, and I don't think it was as early as elementary school. It may have been sometime middle school. I had gone to the public library and I had gotten a book. And to this day, I can't find the book again, but it was about a prince by the name of Kwame, who was from Ghana, and I'm from Ghana. Came here in 1998. And so I was already attracted to the book because I saw the cover and I saw the name and I said, oh, wow, that reminds me of my culture. I pick it up. And it was about a prince who was basically he was meeting the love of his life in the forest where they would meet because they were from opposing tribes. And he had this gold rock that he wanted to give her to promise her that one day he would marry her. And I remember this book so vividly because it blew my mind. And in the forest that day, some slave catchers actually caught him. And they took him and they stripped him of his clothes. And so when they took him because he was in the forest. They didn't take him to his side. They took him to another tribe side. And some of the people there that were captured as well recognized that he was the prince, but they didn't speak the same dialect. And so he was trying to let people know, like, I don't know who they think they are, but they've grabbed me. I don't know what's going on. And it details his life being taken on the transatlantic slave trade, being brought to the Americas, basically growing up in America, going through being a slave. And he arrived right around the time when slavery was being argued by abolitionists and things like that. And so eventually he got to a point where he actually took his slave catchers, or the people that were owning him unjustly, to court for the right to buy a boat. And the book ends with him buying this boat and sailing back to the coast of West Africa. And there's this powerful moment in the book I won't forget where he gets to the coast of West Africa. He gets to Ghana's coast, and he's on his boat, and he looks out and he says, if I get off this boat and I go back to this place, it's not the place I left. There might be someone there who remembers the story of the prince that was lost, but I don't know if it's the same place. And so he turns back around and doesn't go. And I remember reading that because it was like, man, I'm a Ghanaian American young man who is constantly in this battle of trying to assimilate in America, but also preserve his culture. But that was a book that, I mean, I could tell you the different stories in it from front to back. And I've tried for years finding that book again. Can't remember the title. I Google search it and things like that. But it's definitely the book that stuck out to me a lot growing up. And I haven't been able to shake it off.
I'm gonna put my library skills to work on that one for you.
Right.
Kevin, do you remember seeing yourself in a book when you were like in K-12 at all, and be like, one was like, that's me, you know? Do you remember that, having that experience?
I honestly have not had that experience, K through 12. It's been more so like whatever the curriculum requires me to read. And a lot of the times that I would read things were like The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. There was another one, Huckleberry Finn, I think the name of it. Yeah, like, so a lot of the books that I've read, they were like, they never reminded me of a young Black boy living in America. Like, I was born in New York. My family moved down here when I was 5 years old. There's nothing that reminded me of my path, of my lifestyle. So it's like, it's really hard to connect when you're like, I'm sitting here reading about some country boys just having fun or doing whatever they're doing. So a lot of the times I would give it a try and then I would just fade away. Like, I would do what I have to do and then just drop off, because it's like, and then I defined reading as that. So reading is a very vulnerable thing, and you have to catch it when children are young, because if not, by the time they're, high school, I don't like reading, because it's like that mindset has already developed. And I work at an elementary school. A lot of these kids are starting to form their own identities before they go into middle school, high school. So having students see themselves and recognize their own life within a book or a story can definitely revolutionize the way that they think about reading, because it's like, it's just a matter of perspective. And there hasn't been a book that showed me representation or perspective from K through 12 that I could sit here and honestly say that, wow, that was Kevin in a book, or wow, that was me when I was younger in a book, or wow, that could be me later on. So a lot of the things that we were required to read never ever sat right with me, in the sense of like, I can see myself develop in this character. I can never make those personal connections with the story. And like, it's funny because in college at Towson, they were talking about, I took a reading course and they were talking about making connections with the text. And it sounded so foreign to me, because I'm like, you can sit here and make a connection with the text like that. Like, the way that we went into depth about these stories is something that I've never been able to do personally. So it's just so, a part of me feels like I could have had a better opportunity with things. Like, if I did have an opportunity for reading, would that have impacted my SAT scores? Would that have impacted where I went for college? Would that have impacted who I am as a person? So it's literally a domino effect, because if you can't connect with reading, then what are the odds of me connecting with math? What are the odds with me connecting with social studies, science, history? And then it's like, if I don't connect with those things, how am I going to connect with school in general? And then every time I went to the classroom, there's definitely not a teacher that looks like me. So how can I connect with that person that's teaching me the lesson? It's all just this weird bubble from K through 12 that I had to live in. But like, along the way, you do find your great teachers and people who really push you and things like that. But overall, it's like, there's just a lot that's missing, a lot of gaps that just were never filled. So
I want to follow up on something that you just said, Kevin. I'm thinking about like the juxtaposition between when we were in school to now. And I actually just pulled up Montgomery County's grade 9 English curriculum. And I'm looking at the core text options, and I'm seeing authors like Jason Reynolds. I'm seeing W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm seeing just foreign authors. I'm seeing people from all over, and I'm seeing the difference and the intentionality of, them saying like the titles that they've chosen are to interact with diverse perspectives, engage with rich, complex language, and things like that. I don't think we recognize enough, or I don't think school systems, not just Montgomery County, I think people do a disservice when they don't make public acknowledgments of the fact that the books that we were having kids read at a certain point actually did disservice to who they were and their humanity, right? And the books that you named in terms of Huckleberry Finn, you named Tom Sawyer, all these different books had nothing to do with my experience of who I was. And I think the closest thing that I ever read that was had a Black person in it was, what is that one book about the lawyer that
Kill
is
a
trying
Mockingbird.
to kill a mockingbird, right?
Right.
And the imagery of that whole story, all of that, is just so fascinating to me, because it's like, where did people? Sometimes I want to ask English teachers that taught during that time, how did you sleep at night, knowing that you didn't do anything as an educator? I'm not saying all educators do this, but for the educators who were just pushing out that content, how did you sleep at night knowing there were students in your classroom that were not interested in the reading material at all and didn't see themselves in it? And how did that impact us later on in life? But I think for me, my biggest grievance, and we always try to make people understand, is that Brothers of Book is about books, right? It's about literacy, but it's also about equity and access, right? Because even when you change the course text options, if the school itself has a system in which that gears towards and favors a specific demographic within the school and alienates others still, even if you do that, even if you have this or that, it's a whole entire uprooting and analysis of what is wrong and what makes us feel uncomfortable, right? Because if I'm reading All American Boys and I'm reading Brown Girl, Brownstones, and I'm reading this, but I still feel like people think I'm supposed to be an athlete and I'm only going to go to school for sports, or if I still hear people saying like, oh man, so how's your mom doing, and never asking about your dad, and those coded languages and things like that. If we don't get to that part, right, it doesn't matter what books that the kids are reading in school. It does not matter at all. I'm grateful that we're upgrading text and things like that, but I think my biggest challenges in school were beyond the books that I read. I mean, you can hear even when I'm talking about my past, I always joke with my siblings that I think my parents were Pan-Africanist and they just didn't want us to know. And they wanted us to figure out what we wanted to be on our own, because my parents would always try and tell me to read something outside of the curriculum. Like during the summer, like, what are you reading? Why are you reading that? Like, read this book, check out this book, and things like that. But not a lot of kids had that growing up, where their parents were like, well, why do you want to read that book, right? And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that there has to be consistency across the board. You can't just change the core text and not change the core heart of the educators, right? Like if we still have educators that think that Jason Reynolds is a contemporary up and coming author when he's written so many books by now, when do Black authors stop being up and coming, right? When do narratives about Black and Brown people stop being new age books? When do they become classics, right? And so I just wanted to say that, is that I feel like it's so much more, and we have to match that across the board.
Oh man,
Yes.
I just wanted to build a little, this last thought. I'm sorry. When you're so much more, I'm even thinking a little bit deeper about that, because it's like, why was African American history different than just regular U.S. history? Like, why did I have the option to take African American history, but I never had the option to take U.S. history? And what is the difference between the two? Like, what is that distinctual difference? Because if you're telling me that a lot of the inventions and a lot of the things that we have here, a lot of the history is integrated, but it's so separated. I don't know how you were able to create two different courses from separated history, but it's the same. It's a lot of stuff overlapped, but a lot of stories weren't told. And a lot of when we're talking about books, a lot of the books that I had in school, that the textbooks, all those history books, the whole curriculum itself, a lot of those things told me that there was no place for you in here. Like the only place that you could see yourself, you were a slave. You and not only were you a slave, but you needed somebody else to give you your freedoms. You needed somebody else to give you your rights. So a lot of the books that I grew up reading and I was required to read were curriculum books, and those told me that I needed to rely on somebody that did not look like me, and I needed to rely on somebody that, you know, matched a completely different demographic for me to become successful. So matching that with the lack of books that I've had, I mean, it's like if you don't have that person or that thing outside of schools, public schools, if you don't have that thing that can get you motivated and that could push you to think a little bit deeper, then it's we come to this place of where we're accepting things that aren't necessarily how things were. So
I want to kind of just pivot a little bit because I want to take another angle on this. So we have school, right? What were your experiences like with your school library and your public library? Did you feel a sense of belonging? What was that experience like in terms of was that a motivator? How did that impact literacy for y'all?
I think for me, immigrating here at a young age, and experiencing the Black diaspora journey from such a different lens of being a Black immigrant, coming to a place that had been hostile to Black people in history. I think I was heightened to what opportunities exist and how I could flip it for my own benefit. That's just how my family was just figuring things out in America. And so sometimes when I hear people say like they don't believe in handouts, I always laugh. I believe in handouts. I think some of us deserve some handouts. And so when I heard the public library was free, I was like, give me that handout, right? And so anything that I hear is free because I feel like there are people who are owed things in this world because of unjust things that have happened to them. Places that are free, like the library, I felt like I deserved to touch those books. I deserved to be there. Again, it goes back to access. Although I deserved to be there, did I have the same access getting there? Did I have the same ability to get on the bus to get there because I lived in an area that was far away from the library? Did I have the money to actually pay for the bus? What other transportations were available? And then when it comes to the school library, I think my school library sucked in comparison to the public library, right? And any school librarian will tell you they want more books, they want newer books, they want that, but I don't think we prioritize that in the budgets, right? And yeah, I wanted to be in those spaces. I wanted those books. I wanted to feel them because I felt like I deserve them. That knowledge is something that everybody should have access to, but that access part was what was so difficult.
yeah, I would say like public libraries. I didn't see myself in those. I didn't go to those growing up. The only library that I had was my school library, so I will just speak on that experience. Like Isaac was saying, like a lot of the books there, I mean, man, I can tell you the cover was falling off on some. You go to your favorite page and the whole page is gone. And it's like, there's nothing to replace that book with. So it's like all of the good books, everybody went through, everybody used, everybody had. So it's like by the time we funneled down to me, it was like, well, I was really interested in this little flip-o-rama that they have for Captain Underpants, but the whole thing is ripped off, you know, like, so a lot of the books that were there, I mean, it's just not a lot of support that went to those books. And like in the books that were in good condition are the ones that were typically not used as much because libraries just roll over to the next year, to the next year, to the next year. By the time you know it, the library is like 20 years old and the books are like 30 years old and, you know, things like that. So it's, like I said, it's really like talking about it now and thinking about it, like there's not a lot to really connect with. Like it's really not a lot to connect with when you go to these schools that don't offer that much support intentionally. Like there's not really intentional support from K through 12 in these public schools. And like that's just simply how it is. Yeah.
Did you feel the librarians were supportive of you, or how was that experience? Because I think it's kind of sometimes like 1, 2, or either or, you know, like what was your experience? Do you feel like the people that were there did you feel like they were engaging you?
The people that were there, we went there for media. A lot of times for media, or it would be like a special that we would go there, or like, you know, classroom trip. We would go there. They would be really like welcoming and everything like that. But then, you know, we only got like 30 minutes, then we got to go. Or we only got like 45 minutes, then we got to go. We probably did that like once every week or two. So it's like, you don't really connect with them as much, and you don't really get to elaborate on the books that you would like to see or the books that you would like to read, because it's like, you walk in there and it's just overwhelming because they have all these different rows of books going back. And then it's like, okay, I have 30 minutes in here. What exactly am I looking for? And that's even if you're motivated to go look for something. So they were nice, but I think that's like so surface level that I wasn't even able to dig that deep into an intimate connection with them. So,
Isaac?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think school librarians actually don't get enough respect for their expertise. And exactly what Kevin broke down in terms of, we silo their interaction to students to be these 30-minute media center opportunities where we put our media center right in the library. And kids are usually coming in to use the computers, not really touch the books. And we've put these two very different experiences right in the same space, while knowing society is tilting towards one direction versus the other. And we're expecting those librarians to still encourage students to touch the books, while everything they need, they're being told, is on the computer. And schools try to say like, hey, still search a book. We want you to cite one book and things like that. But if you look across the board, and I'll speak to the county that Kevin and I live in, there are schools that don't have enough librarians. They don't have enough people that can work after school to make the library a comfortable and safe space for people who don't want to play sports, who are out of season for a sport, who don't have a club, but really simply just want to read, right? I think our library should be open 2 hours later than our school's final bell, so children can be acquainted to the books in there and actually have some time to do homework and read. We've got to start making libraries feel like a safe place, not just a place to go when your professor or teacher or whatever tells you to go. And I think that's something I didn't realize when I was younger, but when I got older, as we visit schools and we meet these librarians who are like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get them to get One Crazy Summer on our shelves, or I'm trying to get Max Tagalong Moon or things like that. And you're like, oh, wow, you know these books. I was like, yeah, but it comes down to funding. It comes down to this. And I've been appealing for this or that. And I know my high school, Seneca, had a sort of book club that they had created, a librarian created, that would help people read diverse books and sometimes even take trips to meet authors and stuff like that. But it all comes down to funding, right? It all comes down to funding. I think one thing that we have to remember is that people are people, and they usually work under a structure, right? And so a librarian can only do what her job is allowing her to do in terms of, and I think every librarian is doing more than they're paid to do, but you can only do so much without overworking yourself, right? And so I think that if we gave them more resources and more support, we'd actually have a lot more diverse books in our libraries, and maybe students just don't even know where they are in the library.
Yes, there you're gonna have a whole audience of librarians like appreciating that sentiment exactly. So I appreciate that. If I could ask you, who is your reading role model and why? Why were they your reading role model?
Reading role model. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Maybe who turned, I mean, and it can be as you interpret it, because it could be the person who maybe suggested a title to you, or it could be maybe just who you saw that you were like, okay, maybe, you know what I mean? It could be whatever you want it to mean, because it might draw upon something that I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, honestly, if I'm going to be honest with you, I can say that I can't think of a single person. And I think that's what motivates Kevin and I to make sure that other kids don't have to experience that as well. I've talked a little bit about my parents and things like that, but when you say reading role model, I can say confidently that I can't think of one person that I crafted my reading journey after, or that I looked for to give me books and things like that. This was truly a figure it out on your own type of thing. And although there were people in my life that encouraged me to go read, I didn't have somebody that was bringing me new books, that was giving me the agency of picking out what book that I wanted or things like that. And so that is a very common thing for people. People underestimate what it means to have a model in your life, right? To have someone you look up to doing certain things. And so very early on, Kevin and I realized that we were becoming those role model for youth in the community, and eliminating that barrier for them. Because like Kevin said, had I had someone that was teaching me things about literature and stuff when I was younger, I can only imagine who I would be today, right? Where I would go, what I would do. I mean, I think about even just think about the types of jobs that young Black and brown kids want to do. If someone had introduced astronomy to me when I was younger, or different types of doctors, most of our books talk about the first surface layer thing of like, be a lawyer, but what kind of lawyer? Right? Like, what does it mean to be an agent? I want to read books about that. What does it mean to be a doctor of specifically ears, nose, throat, and mouth? Right? Like being that type of stuff. And so for me, I can say that I didn't have it and I'm trying to provide it now.
Yeah, I can say the same exact thing. And it's funny when you said that, like, you know, there's multiple doctors and everything. My principal, uh, we call him Dr. Harris. And then my students were like, how is he a doctor? He doesn't do surgery. He works at this school all the time. And I'm like, there's different levels. Like like the doctor that you see is not always a doctor that, you know, but yeah, I haven't had any role models that I could honestly say that I've seen read a book and then they've told me to read a book. I haven't had that more often interaction with anybody that I could honestly say, you know, they're motivating me to read a book, or I've seen them do great things because they've read books. So it's really been a missing piece. So this is, yeah, like Isaac said, is really motivating to just be who we wanted to see younger and what they're telling us to do. So yeah.
I didn't, you know, I when I wrote the question, I wasn't really sure. My assumption too is that most people have seen something, but to me, I can't even think of mine. So like really thinking about what you're saying, it's true. Like it is true. Like who's the person that's providing that? That's going to be interesting as time goes by to see how people answer that question. One last question I have before we get to your organization is, what is your advice to Black boys and young Black men about reading and literacy? If you could share something, what would that be?
Do not allow the world to define what reading is. I think people think reading is what you read in your English class, but reading is everywhere. You read while you look at the TV guide. You need reading to drive, to read signs. You need reading to text. You need reading. Reading literacy is probably one of our most powerful tools in this world because we speak with letters. We understand with letters. And it is a very, very powerful tool. And once you harness that tool, there's almost no field that you can't get into. You need a basic understanding of literacy to do almost everything in today's society. I think one thing I'm really passionate about is, if you think you don't like reading, just remember you just haven't found a book that reminds you of your experience. And sometimes you find a book that reminds you of your experience, you don't want to touch it because you've had enough of your experience. But reading opens a door for you to find new experiences, live many lives. I've been all over the world because of the books that I've read. I feel like I've lived the lives of so many different people and learned from them. And so think of it as a toolkit. When you're going through something or preparing for something, is pick up a book and learn something new.
Yeah, there was a saying that my mother used to tell me growing up. She would say, in this world, people can take anything from you, but the one thing they can't take is what's up here. They can't take the things that you know. They can't take, the things that you learned. In this life, there's a lot, you're going to face a lot of challenges. And I'm telling you, there's going to be a lot of obstacles. So the life that you want to live, you can definitely get there. It's just going to take work. It's going to take commitment. It's going to take some more time for you to dedicate yourself to getting there. It's not easy. I mean, growing up, all the role models I saw were on TV, or I heard them through music. I used to see basketball players, football players. People used to ask me, who do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be Michael Jordan. I want to be, this artist or that artist. But there's so much more to this life that you don't have to walk down that path. There's so much more to this life. And I'm not saying it's a bad path or anything. I'm just saying that maybe when I was 9 years old, I was dedicated to making it to the NFL, 100%. But life didn't want me to go that path. And it doesn't want it. That's not the path for a lot of people. And that's not saying that you're going to fail or anything like that. It's saying that you're destined for something else in your life. So maybe that's not your calling, but maybe, the things that you're interested in now might be your calling. Maybe you watch YouTube videos about people making jokes. Maybe you can be a comedian. Maybe you watch YouTube videos about different video games and maybe you can be the next video game developer. Maybe you listen to different music and you can be like a producer. There's much more than just being the artist. You can be the producer. You can be so many other things, or maybe you can even be the next director for a movie, or you can possibly be writing your own book about your own life and what you've went through. So you can go ahead and shine the light for others that's coming past you. You're not the only one that's going through this life alone. So understand that we are unique because we have to create our own journey in this world. The books and everything that we have seen and that we've been exposed to haven't been written for us. So right now you have the chance to write your own book, and that book is called your life. So yeah, I'd say.
That was awesome, y'all, too. Thank you. So let's talk about your organization, Brothers with Books, your community action group, born out of the desire to fight for equity, to improve access and cultivate literacy within Montgomery County. Why is the work you're doing so important? What gaps are you filling?
I think I'd say that we're filling the obvious gaps. And I said this to a council member recently, that we live in a community where people are cognizant, are aware of the inequities that exist. They know it. Everybody in this community knows it. I don't want to meet anybody that lies to me and says they don't. Because I'm a firm believer that everybody knows what oppression is, because if you ask someone to imagine if they lost something they have that they really love, they would be sick to their stomach, right? You see someone on the side of the street experiencing homelessness and you don't want to experience that. You see someone hungry, you don't want to experience that. And so I think our community is aware of those gaps. It's just about the willingness to act. What am I really going to do? And in a very practical way, Brothers with Books is a demonstration of how easy it is to act. There are so many people who message us and say, wow, gosh, I've had books in my closet for over 30 years now. Why? Why do you have books picking up dust when there's been 30 years worth of children born in the time that you've had those books picking up dust? It's the same thing. You can just replace books with anything else. It could be brothers with chairs, brothers with clothes, brothers with food, whatever it is. It's a practical display of what happens when a community recognizes a need, checks their own heart and area to say, I have a way to help this immediately. Here's what I can do, and acting on it, right? And so the gap I think the gap is really up here, and in here, right? Getting people to actually act and say, I want to do something about this problem that I'm seeing. And Kevin and I always joke that we really hope that one day somebody's just like, hey, did you hear about Sisters with Medicine? And we're like, what? And it's like somebody started this community action group to get more Black and brown girls to get into medicine. That's what we want to hear. We want to fill those gaps. We want to be contagious, and get people aware that we just use our time to make this happen. We have no crazy grant that someone hid in our accounts or something like that. We don't have a bookmobile we're using or something like that. It's just love. It's just love and seeking the fair systems that are there, and are waiting to be created.
Yeah, I would say one of the gaps that Brothers with Books fills would just be representation for the youth and for just surrounding people around us. I mean, when Isaac and I first started, we were just like thinking about the perspective. We would say like, wow, 2 Black men are caring for their community. It's not something that you see in the news every day because it's not highlighted. You know, they're not gonna, you never see news like, oh, a Black man has held the door for an elderly lady. No, you don't see things like that, you know? So me and Isaac, when we started this, we were like, you know, we want to be intentional about 2 Black men started this thing. We're showing love and support for our own community because this is the community that we came from. Although the beginning wasn't ideal, but we took that. And what can you do with things that are not ideal in your situations? You can change those into things that actually work in your favor, not only for you, but for so many more people around you. So when we go to schools, I mean, these are things that we definitely have open conversations about. When we're like, in my classroom, I'm a 5th grade teacher. In my classroom, I talked to my students and I told them how me and Isaac have started this. We told them that, you know, this is the foundation, this is what happened, and this is where we've taken this since then. So what lesson can you learn from that? And then they recited back to me, they would say, although things may not be perfect in the beginning, that doesn't define who you are as a person, and you can change what happened to you so you can be better, not only for yourself, but for other people. And these are 5th graders thinking of that concept. So the way that we go about these things, they can take that and incorporate that into their own personal lives. Although, you know, I'm experiencing this, that's not going to tell me who I am when I'm 25 years old. So, you know, just providing hope, I would say, hope and representation. So that's something that, you know, we hope to fill that gap for.
Can you, I gave a little bit about what the kind of mission is for your group, and you've just explained the gap. What else can you explain about the story of your organization?
That, like many things that Black people create, it is sometimes born both out of trauma and joy. And that this is something I have to explain a lot to people at work, is that I don't do social change things. Kevin and I don't do social change things just because we're also living under that oppressive umbrella. It's not like, I think sometimes people highlight us or talk about us and make it sound like we're just 2 giddy guys who decided to just get up and give out books. It's like, no, we've experienced the brutality of a negligent system, a deliberate system as well, right? And so we created this because it felt like we were drowning and we wanted to swim. And if we knew that we were getting better at swimming while the waves are crashing, there's somebody else who's not doing good right now, who feels like they're drowning as well. And if we can do something to teach them what we know, which might not be the cure to the waves, but what we know about how to fight that drowning feeling, then we're making our community a little bit better. But I always want people to understand that this was not, I know some people who get up and do something in their community because they just wanted to do something in their community, but like we are fighting for ourselves and people that look like us too. This is a fight. This is a fight for people's future. their pathways to peace, their their ability to just change the world. Um, and that's really at the core of it, is just when you see us doing this stuff, remember that it is also a part of the fight. It is also a part of the fight. Yeah.
Yeah, that was perfectly said. I can't even elaborate on that one. So that's good.
So let me try to, so what y'all do is y'all gather books and you, I'm assuming you take them to community places and it's an event and people can get books, right? Like, how do y'all get the books and how many, like, what's the process of doing this? The actual event and you know.
So we our inbox is completely community driven. If there's ever an event that the community calls us for, we try our 100% best to be there. Depending on the load of the community, of like what the entire process is, that kind of varies on how many books we bring, what kind of books, things like that. Like for an example, when we go into schools, we look at the demographics of the schools and we try to represent those demographics with the books that we bring. And depending on how many classes we see, or how many students they have available for like to swing by the library, that depends on how many books, like the reading levels and everything. We try to be very intentional about every single step that we do. So for the past event that we did for Juneteenth, we decided, we were just like, okay, we need books that are going to catch people's eyes. So we needed those like colorful pop books. And we also needed something that's refreshing. So Isaac said something interesting that day when he was like, judge a book by its cover. And typically, we live in a world where if it doesn't catch your attention in the first 10 seconds of you interacting with it, it's not going to catch your attention at all. Like whether it's a movie, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a video game, anything like that. So find yourself in something that reminds you of you, find yourself in something that catches your attention, because it's just like, it varies, it changes. So the books that we get, they come from, we get them from publishers, we get them from, who was it? Somebody was an author for or a book reviewer for the New York Times. We also get them from books that have been nominated for awards. After they select the awards, they like who gets the award, they give the books to us. And a lot of our books also just come from the community. They come from teachers that are retiring. They come from people who, just like Isaac said, they have books in their house that they've had for 30 years. There's a lot of wealth outside of money that we have and that we store that we don't give back. So I think by us taking the books approach, a lot of people have began to recognize that wealth that they have, and then they donate that wealth, which is kind of like a cycle that we're trying to do. Right now it's this, but in the winter we're going to need coats. So what can we do for coats? We still have people that go hungry every day. What can we do for food? So hopefully this could be just like the beginning process of a domino effect to where everybody else goes. So, and the first time that we got books were from the Maryland Book Bank located in Baltimore. Can never forget them, because when we went in there, we told them we were just searching for books for hours. The young lady there said, "What are you guys doing here?" We told her our mission, told her everything that we plan to do. And then she said, just leave with as many books as you can. So the recognition of just the community and just that love and that the things that come from just the good-hearted people here have really driven to where it is now. I mean, without that, we wouldn't even be nowhere near where we are now. So
how do you engage with parents and guardians? Like what role, how do you navigate that within what y'all are doing?
I think similar to what Kevin was saying, it's all about agency. We really believe in agency. We don't just go knocking on people's doors. We allow people to bring us into their communities and show us where to sit, right? It's like when you go over to someone's house for a dinner party, they usually show you where the dining room is. You don't just walk around looking for it, right? And so I think that's the most powerful moments we've had is when people welcome us into their community, and someone that's already known in the community can be the bridge to the parents for us, because they come to this place for food distribution, they come to this place for worship, they come to this place, they know those people, and so somebody connects us and we build off from there. I think we've had events where parents actually tell us the type of books that they've been struggling to find. We had one where somebody was talking about how they were struggling to find books about kids with dyslexia. And then next thing we knew, we had gotten in touch with an author that had books about children with dyslexia, autism, and we started giving out those books, right? We encourage parents to come tell us what the struggle is. I mean, I wish we would record it better or even showcase it better, but at our events, we always have parents that are forcing their kids to come grab books. And then it's a conversation about, to the kids, well, what do you like? And they'll say, honestly, I like movies. Da, 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 da. It's like, okay, what movie do you like? Oh, I love Marvel movies. Well, we have Marvel comics right here, and that is also reading. We want to get you in the habit of reading, right? And so they'll be like, wait, you have comics? Yeah, comics are also a part of reading.
Yes.
We have to warm you up. We have to get you there. And so we really enjoy talking to the kids, just as much as we do with the parents, right? Because the kids will tell you what the barrier is, that sometimes the parents are having a struggle figuring out. They just haven't found books that remind them of the things that they love yet. And it's about pointing parents. I think we all, growing up, thought it had to be a hardcover book, or it wasn't a book. And now people are understanding that we're reading all the time. And it's about engaging, because when you go from comics, you move on to mangas. You move on from mangas, you decide to pick up another book, and so on and so on and so on. And so I think the engagement happens at the core agency, and then at the core of the children too, right?
Okay. So y'all are in Maryland. If someone sees this and they're like, I want to do this in Cleveland, or I want to do this in wherever they are, what are some of the things that they should consider in terms of modeling what y'all are doing? What are some of the things that they need to think about as they're navigating this? What are some of the things y'all learned that might save them a step? Things like that.
Don't try to build another Brothers with Books. Try and build whatever feels natural for your community, right? Literacy might not be the most pressing thing right now in your community, but figure out what that is. We've had these conversations. We've had people in Houston. We've had people. I mean, I spoke to someone I think that lives in Europe that was talking about how they'd like to do something similar. And it all comes down to, do you feel like this is the greatest need in your community? And is this your greatest capacity for impact? Those are two important questions, right? For us, we knew that we were going to be able to do this book thing. We knew that that's something we were going to do, and we knew the need because we had experienced the need. And we knew a lot of people had forgotten that need existed. And so that the advice comes down to, if you recognize that it is literacy and it is books, we are always open to having discussions and teaching people what we've learned and things like that. I would say one of the, probably maybe a goofy one, is that people will give you trash. People will give you boxes that on the top look like really nice books for youth, and then you'll see that there's a lot of old, torn up books. I mean, we've gotten more Bibles than you can think of, because nobody wants to throw away a Bible, right? We've gotten so many things that just, we can't go give to K through 12 students, right? And so that does happen, and you have to recognize how to articulate to people that you want lightly used to new books that are for K through 12 age appropriate books. And those are the growing pains, right? Kevin and I have figured out kind of like how to have people mail in things. We got a PO box. We learned what challenges storage facilities are, right? In terms of, like, I haven't parked my car in my garage in 2 years now. And Kevin probably operates right now, right next to him, he probably has a stack of books. Stack of books. And so it is a heavy lift on you, the individuals. Remember that, because very few people are going to say, hey, you can use my garage, right? Like, that's not, we haven't reached that point, right? Except for people that are really close to us, right? Like Kevin's fiance's family has been really helpful with that, having us store some books there. My family has allowed us to store books in different places. And so that it just be aware that it is a heavy task. It might look easy to some people, but it is heavy.
Yeah, I would, man, one thing we definitely learned is prioritizing too. Definitely making room for your own schedule, your work schedule, Brothers with Book schedule, like how we've managed through that. We call on a lot of volunteers for support too. It's not like me and Isaac are the face, but we do have some people that help us. We can call up and say, hey, we're running this event. Are you available? Are you free? So you'll see a lot of times in like either videos, pictures, or anything like that, that it's not just me and Isaac. You might see somebody with a Brothers with Books shirt on the background. It's because like we do have a group that helps us too. So although, me and Isaac get a lot of the credit, but we have a lot of great people that come out and dedicate their time to support too. So we don't tackle this just us two. We tackle it, as a collective, because the only way to help community is with community. So that's kind of our approach with it too. So don't try to do everything alone. Don't try to be Superman. Rely on your resources too to get you through community projects. So.
What are some of the most memorable moments y'all have had running this initiative?
Oh man, some of the most memorable. I would say this happens at every book giveaway, but it's the one that kind of just reminds me of the purpose at all. Whenever we see families walking past and we're like, free books, they literally stop in their tracks and their head just immediately turns to our station. They're like, did you say free? We're like, yeah, free books, free. Like, it happens every single time. And I love every moment of it, because it's like, we've gotten so used to just a transaction lifestyle where, you buy something, whatever. But now it's just like, no, we're giving you something. We're giving you the opportunity for growth. You never really experience that many free things. So it's just, I just love that moment every single time it happens. So that's probably one of the most memorable things that happens.
For me, I think it's a collection of different tiny memories that feel so big. It was the young boy at the middle school at Julius West with the twists in his hair, who was grumpy and didn't want to be there talking about books, but then found a book about football and his whole demeanor changed. It was at the mall for the back to school event when a young girl wearing a hijab with her mom saw a book with the girl with the hijab on the cover and grabbed it so fast, I don't even think she got a chance to see what color it was. It is when people, older people in the community, come tell us about efforts they've tried to do in different places and spaces around giving books to prisons and things like that. And you hear these amazing stories, and you hear who in the community is doing the work, and you don't even know, right? It's those moments, those special moments mean so much, because I think one thing that I've learned is people are doing the work. People are doing the work. We just don't know about it. And because we don't know about it, we can't help them. And so until we learn more about it, yeah. So those moments, I mean, they help me sleep at night, right? Seeing, it's one of those things where you have to be there when you see a young girl look at her mom, and it's like they're speaking in each other's heads. When she saw that book with the girl with the hijab on it, and she looked in her mom's eyes, and you could tell her mom was experiencing what she was experiencing, because I know her mom wished she saw that growing up too. Those moments are priceless. I can't replicate them. I don't think any cinematographer can create that again. That is just a real moment where you're humbled, because that's what you wanted growing up, those moments too.
Yeah. Oh man, that's powerful. How has what y'all have done changed you? How has it changed you? What have you learned?
So I can definitely say when me and Isaac were first pulled over, um, that happened 2017. Brothers with Books didn't start till 2019. So throughout those 2 years, I went to therapy. I was in therapy, just talking about the situation, just trying to mentally get myself in a position to express this somehow, express what has happened to me somehow. Um, and people, I know, especially, I can only speak on my family. My family, they we're either really hot about therapy or really cold, depending on the family member. You know, some people are really for it, some people are really against it for, whatever reason. But for me, it worked for me. Um, Therapy isn't just something that you attend when you're sad or anything like that, but I definitely needed it in that moment. Um, because in that moment, I felt really hopeless. I felt really lost. That was around the time that happened 2017 and 2018. I had to move to Baltimore County to attend Towson. So just the whole thing about me knowing about Baltimore County and the stigma with it and the whole police interactions that I've seen, um, a lot of anxiety. So in those moments, I felt really defeated. I felt like, who am I? Like, who am I in this world? Who am I outside of just outside of Kevin? But with Brothers with Books, I would say that it kind of rejuvenated the way that I think about things. Like I would kind of just think a lot like negative about some things, but then I realized that, the change that I want to see in the world, why am I waiting? Why am I waiting to um, go and be proactive about things? If I see that there's a problem, why can't I address it? Why can't I create a system that can come and address those things? So it rejuvenated my mindset in the sense of I didn't let that moment like kind of hinder me, but it built me to think even deeper about myself and think deeper about what my community needs, which is something I really never thought of before Brothers with Books. So I would say it just provided more positive thinking and just like thinking in general. So
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. What's next for y'all? What's next for Brothers with Books? Like, where do you see this organization going?
So we've been very careful about our incorporation journey and trying to figure out exactly what the strongest board would be. We've had a lot of people say, I'd love to be a part of your board and love to be a part of your team, but we've taken our time and deliberately made the decision to remain a community action group for the time being until we iron out those serious logistical things. And we just filed our trademark this past weekend for Brothers with Books. And so by the time this airs, hopefully we've gotten, a yes and a trademark, and then we'll be working on that incorporation in terms of nonprofit and figuring that out next. I think what's next is easy for Kevin and I to say. We are going to work ourselves out of a job. We want there to be no purpose for Brothers with Books. And that's what makes creating a board kind of harder, because most people are used to being on a board and thinking, oh, we're going to help this organization be here for 20 years. No. We want a board that is action driven, that is serious about trying to help solve some of the problems. And I want to get to a point where one day somebody tells Kevin and I, oh, we don't need you all this week. We're okay. We have enough books. They've updated the curriculum. They've updated the books in the library, and we're doing okay. And we may not be needed here, but we may be needed somewhere else, right? And so, yeah, I think what's next is we want to grow our scholarship program that we had, mentorship program that we have called Sisters y Hermanas, where we have 4 young, amazing Black and Brown women from different parts of the county that we are so proud of. One of them is going to Johns Hopkins this fall. Another one signed up for her ACT. It is an amazing experience to be 2 Black men helping mentoring 4 Black and Brown women and being a bridge to connect them to amazing Black and Brown women that we know in our community. And that came about right after Breonna Taylor unjust demise, and Kevin and I having a very serious conversation about it's not enough to say you love Black women. It's not enough to say that. It's important to do something to show that you care, and being a bridge and letting 4 young ladies step on our backs and walk across to the next side they want to get to is important. And we want to do that, scale it out, right? We want to get to know youth in our community. Up next will be young Black and brown boys, and working with programs like the Brothers Program in Gaithersburg to just scale out that kind of work and showing love to our youth in our community, youth of all backgrounds, because I think all of our youth need to be shown love. Yeah.
Nice. This is, some things, you know, are meant to be. And I think this moment is just defiant at what y'all are doing. It's very powerful. Okay, just a couple more things and we can wind this down. But I wanted to know, in your opinion, what needs to happen to engage Black boys and young men with literacy? What's, for all that's happening, especially with COVID and things like that, in your opinion, if you could help policymakers, if you could help administrators, from what you see and what you're doing, what do you think needs to happen, or researchers or librarians? What can be done?
I think, so I'm getting my doctorate in public policy and administration. And I decided to embark on that journey because I felt like public policy was so coded, and I wanted to become a decoder for my community, and be able to explain things to people of like, this is what this actually means. This is what you're actually voting on. This is why it's working this way and why it's not. And one of the most challenging things for me during this process is that the process has actually taught me how to be coded too. It's like a whole entire different language, right? And whenever I speak to legislators, council members, and things like that, I'm always so startled to know that people aren't talking to the people that they want to help. They're creating things with them in mind, with good intention, but not bringing them to the table or going to their table or creating a new one. And so if you want to do something to help Black boys, talk to Black boys. If you want to do something to help Latinx people, talk to Latinx people, and meet them where they are. Go to the barbershops, go to the after school programs, speak to these coaches, speak to these people, and get an understanding of really what their problems are. Because sometimes you see somebody with torn up shoes and you think their biggest problem is their shoes, and then they tell you that they actually have a heart condition. And they could care less about the shoes they're wearing, right? And so speaking to people is really the gateway to helping them. There's this book that I really love, and I wish it was near me right now, but in the beginning, the author, it's a collection of stories written by different people whose stories travel through immigration in some capacity, maybe their parents or whatever. And he said, there are people out there in the world that say that they are fighting for the voiceless. And damned be those people, because there's no such thing as voiceless. Nobody oppressed is silent. They may not be speaking as loud as you want them to, but if you shut up and listen, you'll hear that they've always been telling you that they're not happy with what's going on. And so if you think that there are problems in certain communities, consider it their way of letting you know that there's something messed up. When you see crime, consider it another metric for understanding that something is broken, right? And so to any legislator, policymaker, principal, and things like that, if you are not having daily conversations with people, and if you don't stop seeing people as a monolith, right? Black people are not a monolith. Hispanic people are not a monolith. We do not all agree on things. Our experiences are different. Until we get to that side, right? Until we get to that side, children won't care about reading, because again, we read all the time. And so if I'm reading all the time and my TV is making me seem like a criminal, my news stations are making me seem like a criminal, I'm not being talked about in the newspaper for anything but sports. It's like you're reading all the time, you're digesting things all the time. And so by the time you hand me a book, by the time I'm like 10, I've already read all I need to read about what you think about me. And so telling me, oh yeah, you're in this book is like, I'm in a whole lot of other things too, that I've read before you handed me this book. And so it is bigger than the book and the curriculum and the reading list. It is so much more. It is about getting them to really feel like they have agency. And I'm so passionate about this. That's why I haven't shut up. It's because I'm so passionate about this, because I want people to know that stop voting for people that don't come speak to your community. Absolutely, just stop. Stop voting for people who don't have daily conversations with their community as well. We are not, nobody that has been elected is too busy to speak to their neighbor. We need to stop that, because if they're not connected, they're not going to create policies that actually connect to our problems and solutions.
Mhm. Yes, yes. Kevin, would you like to chime in?
Hey, he got that. That's his question. He just talked about the park. I can't say anything else.
Finally, how can people find or support your organization?
So we are on social medias. We have our Instagram, Brothers with Books. Our Facebook, you can search us up, Brothers with Books. Our Twitter is broswbooks. And our email is brothers.w.books@gmail.com. All of those are ways to just get in contact with us, but in ways to honestly support us would be to analyze your community needs, address those needs, find different avenues and different ways on how to support those who usually aren't thought of and supported in general. So supporting your community is supporting us. So
yeah, and understand that when anyone emails us about donation, we always say we do not think about the money first. If you are thinking financially, that's amazing. If you want to give something to a community action group, awesome. But know that we are looking for people to donate their time, donate their books, and donate their commitment, right? Let people know that you support us and you support what we're doing and open doors for us. We do have a P.O. box. We have different opportunities for people to serve. So if you would like to write a letter to a child in our community that will receive one of our books, you can write a letter to our P.O. box, which is Brothers with Books, 22505 Gateway Center Drive, Clarksburg, Maryland, MD 208719998. P.O. Box 1881. I am so passionate about the letter writing thing. If you have 5 minutes in your day, write a letter to someone in the community. Write it as if you're writing yourself. We vet all the letters. So nobody's going to get away with writing anything spooky, but write a letter of encouragement, show some love to some of the community, because we hide them in books. Sometimes we'll go to libraries and hide them in libraries. I hope we don't get in trouble for that, any librarians watching. But they're just letters of affirmation, notes just to remind people that they matter and that there's people in the community that care about them.
Thank you so much. Please hold on while I pause, but thank you for your time and everything that you're doing. You are greatly appreciated. Thank you.
thank you.